The United States is putting over 15,000 personnel and more than 100 aircraft into the Strait of Hormuz starting this week. President Trump has called it Project Freedom, escorting stranded third-country vessels through waters that Iran has effectively used as a geopolitical weapon during its conflict with the U.S. and Israel. Iran has already pushed back hard, warning that any American interference constitutes a ceasefire breach, while Trump has made clear that any interference will be dealt with, quote, forcefully. The stakes for global energy markets, for the ceasefire itself, and for America's credibility in the region could not be higher. Joining me now are Marcus Webb, our defense and security analyst, and Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor. Marcus, let me start with you. Is Trump walking into an Iranian trap here, or is this the moment of clarity the region has been waiting for?
Thanks, Emma. Let me be absolutely direct about this. There is no trap. What there is a regime that has spent 40 years testing Western resolve and finding it wanting, and an American president who has finally decided to call that bluff with actual military capability rather than strongly worded diplomatic communiques. We're talking about 15,000 personnel and over 100 aircraft. That is not a patrol. That is a statement. Iran knows what happened the last time they directly confronted American naval power in this strait. 1988, Operation Praying Mantis. The U.S. Navy sank half the Iranian fleet in a single day. The IRGC leadership remembers that. What concerns me about the media framing, and I include outlets like the New York Times here, is this reflexive impulse to treat American force projection as the destabilizing factor rather than Iran's blockade of international shipping lanes. Douglas Murray has made this point brilliantly. The West has spent decades treating Iranian aggression as the weather, something to be managed and endured, rather than a deliberate policy choice that can be reversed by sufficient application of countervailing pressure. Project Freedom is that countervailing pressure. And I'll say this, if Iran fires on a U.S. naval escort, Trump will respond, and that response will end the debate about whether America is serious.
But Marcus, here's the uncomfortable question. Trump himself admitted Iran's latest peace offer is not acceptable. He hasn't ruled out returning to full hostilities, and we have a ceasefire that both sides are now publicly accusing the other of breaching. Are we watching a peace process, or are we watching the stage being set for round two? And Sophia, what's your take on this from the market's perspective?
Well, look, I think Marcus is right on the strategic logic, but he's glossing over something that markets are absolutely not glossing over. The Strait of Hormuz handles somewhere between 17 and 21 million barrels of oil per day. 20% of global oil supply moves through that choke point. The moment this ceasefire framework shows cracks, and right now it's showing significant cracks, oil markets price in risk faster than any diplomat can manage the narrative. War risk premiums from Lloyd's have already spiked. Shipping insurance costs are through the roof. The trajectory here matters enormously for global inflation, for supply chains that are already fragile post-COVID, post-Ukraine. And here's what I think people are missing. Project Freedom might be strategically sound, and I believe it is, but it only stabilizes markets if Iran actually complies. If the IRGC starts mining corridors or running drone harassment operations against vessels before they reach the U.S. escort, we could see partial disruption that's actually worse for price discovery than a clean closure. Because markets can price a closure, they can't price ambiguity. The economic argument for doing this firmly and decisively is actually stronger than the diplomatic one.
I hear what Sophia is saying about market ambiguity, but with respect, that misses the point entirely about what the alternative was. The alternative was leaving those ships stranded indefinitely while the international community politely asked Iran to please consider reopening the strait when it was convenient. That's not ambiguity. That's capitulation. And markets price capitulation too. They just price it more slowly and more catastrophically. Here's the thing. 1987, Ronald Reagan faced exactly this scenario. Iran was mining the Gulf, attacking tankers, playing the same asymmetric harassment game. Reagan reflagged Kuwaiti tankers and put the U.S. Navy in front of them. Iran backed down. Not immediately, not without incidents. But they backed down because the cost-benefit calculation changed. Trump has changed that calculation again. Iran will probe the edges of this operation, They will absolutely try low-level harassment. But direct confrontation with a U.S. carrier group? They're not suicidal. The IRGC commanders want to keep their jobs and their lives. Strength works. It has always worked in this strait.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you to give me your honest assessment, not the diplomatic version, in 6 months' time. Is the Strait of Hormuz open, closed, or something worse? Sophia, where do you see this playing out?
The way I see this playing out, in the most likely scenario, is a grudging, functional reopening. Ships move, the escorts hold, and Iran engages in what I'd call theatrical defiance without operational confrontation. Markets partially normalize, insurance premiums come down from the extreme highs but stay elevated, and we enter a new status quo where American naval presence in the strait is permanent and institutionalized rather than episodic. That's actually a better long-term outcome for global trade than the pre-war arrangement, where Iranian harassment was a constant, low-level tax on maritime commerce. The risk I'd flag is that a partial solution, where some routes work and others don't, actually embeds uncertainty into energy pricing for years. If current trends in the diplomatic track continue and Iran's peace offer stays unacceptable to Washington, we could find ourselves with an operational strait and a political vacuum, which historically tends to fill with the next crisis faster than anyone expects.
Here's what concerns me most, and this keeps me up at night. It's not Iranian military capability, it's Iranian domestic politics. The hardliners in Tehran need this conflict for internal legitimacy. A ceasefire that looks like Iranian capitulation is politically dangerous for the regime. That creates an incentive, not for open warfare, because they'd lose catastrophically, but for just enough harassment to claim they're resisting, just enough provocation to keep nationalist sentiment activated at home. One miscalculation by an IRGC commander trying to prove his credentials, one mine in the wrong place, one drone that gets too close to a U.S. destroyer, and we are back in active hostilities faster than any diplomat can get on a plane. The trajectory suggests the next 90 days are the most dangerous window, the period when Iran has to decide whether to genuinely accept the new reality or gamble that domestic political survival requires one more act of defiance. History tells us that cornered revolutionary regimes make bad decisions.
Marcus Webb, Sophia Reeves, thank you both. Project Freedom launches Monday with 15,000 American personnel and the credibility of U.S. deterrence on the line. One thing is absolutely certain. In Tehran tonight, someone is staring at a map of the Strait of Hormuz and realizing that the era of consequence-free maritime blackmail may be over.